Has anyone ever walked the whole coastline of South Africa? That would be a pretty cool thing to do. And so I went back to work and now had this idea in my mind, but it was a crazy, huge thing. But I did slowly start looking into it.
What's happening, guys? Welcome to a new episode of Jester Radio. First off, mention our sponsors. Got to pay the bills, keep the lights on, stuff like that. Nutricon is our first sponsor. You can use the code FITFEB, I believe. I'm going to put it on the screen. Also link in the description. You can save 20% off on all orders. And then we actually have a new sponsor, which is quite cool. Thank you, Cream Supreme. So if you want 15% off on all your Cream Supreme orders, you can use the code Jester Radio. I'll put that obviously in the description and everything. And then you can save 15% on Cream Supreme and 20% off on Nutricon. Today's guest, adventurer. Recently I've got into some similar thing, have a great interest for things that he has been doing and has done his whole life, I assume. And, starting off with what I want to talk to him about is, the amazing feats that he has achieved that, people wouldn't do. And actually it's also just more about his journey from, a corporate life, and we'll get into that, but his corporate environment that he was in, and, something that most people in this world think like that's the way to go. They think, this is the only route to success and happiness. But at the end of the day, if you aren't happy every single day, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to chase happiness more than anything else. And if you are doing something you love, that is going to bring you far more happiness than any amount of, anything else and worldly possessions. And that's something that I've been going away from. So Grant Christie, bro, thank you so much. Thank you. That was a very roundabout introduction, bro. So I apologize. That was terrible.
No worries. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
So first off, bro, you were a civil engineer, right?
Correct. Yeah. Studied civil engineering at Pretoria, and then started working in the industry. Had to, as you say, pay the bills, keep the lights on, and I was given a bursary by a company, and so I started working for them after my studies.
How long did you work as an engineer for?
For 4 years. So 4 years of studies, 4 years of work, and I mean, it was already in varsity where I started realizing that I don't think this is going to be the rest of my life, but I wasn't quite sure where I was going to head. And so having those 4 years of working in the corporate world was valuable in the sense that it gave me a bit of a foundation and experience in that environment, in working with those kinds of people. But yeah, I just grew more and more frustrated sitting in that office, staring out the window going, I want to be like those birds, so got to a point where I eventually decided that this is not where I want to be.
So let's walk through that journey of, that decision. You were on a 23-day holiday, or what I was obviously reading on your website, you're on a 23-day holiday, and then, you had to go back home. You're like, I don't want to have to go back and sit in an office in Joburg, Pretoria, or whatever.
Yeah, at that time it was a holiday. These days I would call that work. I was on a school expedition with my high school, St. Albans College, and they do this thing called the Journey, which is a 23-day expedition that the grade 10 boys go on. And I was doing it just as a volunteer, helping facilitate one of the groups. And as you say, it was towards the end of that, I was contemplating going back to work. And I was just like, this is far more enjoyable, being out in this beautiful natural place in the bush with a backpack on my back, with everything I need with me. And that sort of started the cogs turning, and I started having memories of other expeditions and trips and adventures I'd been on.
And now that process of, making that decision to, go back, and what did you go put in notice, or how did that go about?
So these memories of doing the Otter Trail and spending a night in a cave on the beach near Bushman's River mouth sort of started coming to mind, and I began to wonder, has anyone ever walked the whole coastline of South Africa? That would be a pretty cool thing to do. And so I went back to work and now had this idea in my mind, but it was a crazy, huge thing. But I did slowly start looking into it, start Googling, has anyone ever done this before? Started finding some names. But it was a long process from going, okay, this is an idea, to going, okay, I'm going to do this. And I only resigned from my job 2 years later. So it was a 2-year process of thinking, dreaming, planning, speaking to people, and eventually also on the same side being more and more frustrated with work and getting to a point where it was almost, I was being pushed rather than being drawn by the adventure. I was being pushed by the frustration of the office life. And yeah, eventually then plucked up the courage and started telling people I'm going to do this. And yeah, wrote a resignation letter. And I was met with a lot of resistance. Friends, family, colleagues, people didn't think it was a very good idea to give up this good job. I mean, it's a really promising industry to be working in. And people were just resistant to the idea of leaving it behind. People said things like, what a waste of your education, or how can you give up this steady salary, or, things like that. Like, this is such a huge risk you're taking. And I found that, I had to learn that people were actually projecting their own fears, their own concerns, their own excuses, their own justifications onto me. I found that what I was doing challenged them and challenged their situation or the rut that they were in. People don't like that. They don't like being challenged or having a light shone on those areas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most times if someone disagrees with what you're doing, or they see you living a life and doing certain things, it's just because they're not willing to sacrifice what you're sacrificing in pursuit of your goal and your dream. It's more about, I'm not willing to do that, so let me pass judgment onto them, which is unfair because, I mean, the moment you go judge them about something, then you're the bad guy. But just because you're breaking away from what society expects, it's deemed okay for them to judge you. And, friends, family, tons of people will judge someone for making a decision like that, where it's, people will kill to have a good engineering job. What are you doing? But I mean, to each his own. What makes me happy doesn't make you happy. Like, let me live my life.
Yeah, it's a difficult lesson to learn, and I had to learn it as well. If we fast forward to the end of the expedition, and I had come back after the coastal walk, and I happened to meet up with some schoolmates one evening when I was out. And, initially the conversation was all, wow, that thing you did was so amazing. Like, that was epic, so cool. And after a while, the conversation kind of went back to their normal, rugby on the weekend, or they had all studied some sort of BCom, so talking about economics or finance. And I was just standing there, having been on this epic expedition, which really, and we can get into it later, but changed a whole lot of my perspectives and outlooks. And I was just sitting there going, these people are missing the point of life. I don't want to be here. And I left. I went home. And I told that story to a friend of mine, and she challenged me and called me out on it and said, you've been promoting that people must pursue their passions, do what they want to do what they love doing, shouldn't be bound by other people's expectations. And here you are judging these guys for the decisions they made and the life they're living. And I was like, whoa, okay, yeah, you're right.
But also to dissect that, most of the time those guys they're just doing it because it's what expected and what they've perceived as doing their passion.
It's not necessarily a conscious decision.
Like, whereas yours is a far more conscious decision.
Yeah.
Whereas with them, it's probably like their parents wanted them to study BCom, or their parents wanted them to do certain things, and society deems success as lots of money. So that pursuit of that is them chasing their passion, when actually, but it could be for some of them, of course.
Yeah, it could be.
But
and
I think majority it probably isn't.
Yeah. So, but that was the realization for me, is to not come from a place of judgment.
Yeah.
And to accept the decisions they've made, whatever their motives are. That's the decision they've made. So I also need to accept that, even if it's, like you say, different to mine. It's a difficult lesson, though, and we do tend to jump on that bandwagon.
Well, let's go that coastline, was it 3,000 kilometers?
So if you Google the length of the coastline of South Africa, it's 2,798, I think. Over the 8 months, my Garmin clocked 3,514 kilometers, which I think is a bit of an overread. They're always about 10% over, but I think 3,200 to 3,300 is probably a realistic estimate of the actual distance I walked.
So now walking on the coast, do you obviously walk on the beaches, and then at night, did you camp? How did you do the sleeping situation? Was it camping every night? Was it, going and pitching a tent, or was it, you scheduled and made sure that you had a place to stay?
The length of the coast and the duration of the expedition made it very difficult to sort of plan each day. And so I would sort of look ahead the next few days, or maybe towards the next town. So I started on the Namibian border with South Africa at a little town called Alexander Bay at the Orange River mouth. And from there I knew it was 90 kilometers to Port Nolloth. In between there's nothing. And so I knew I needed enough food and enough water to get me there. And I had my tent, and off I would go without much of a plan. And so a lot of the time I was just pitching my tent, in the dunes or in the bush or wherever it was. But I found as the journey went on, I started meeting the most amazing people. Obviously, it's a bit of a curiosity seeing someone walking on the beach with a huge backpack. And in the smaller places, people would be curious, and they'd come, chat to me and ask what I was up to. And inevitably, those conversations would lead to someone offering some sort of assistance, either something simple like a bottle of water or an apple, to, inviting me to come stay over. So if I were to guess, I think about 25% of the nights I actually slept out in my tent or on the beach. And the rest of the time I was either staying with people in their homes or in lodges or backpackers or hotels or whatever it was. And only a handful of occasions did I have to pay for accommodation. So people were, out of the goodness of their heart and wanting to be a part of this project or part of something bigger, were inviting me in to come and stay with them, which was absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Well, I assume you obviously encountered some dangerous portions of the trip where, pitching a tent and, you see people walking on the beach that don't look, too kind, or, were there any of those situations where your life was threatened?
So it was a major concern, especially for friends and family beforehand. And one of the concerns people raised beforehand was saying, is that safe? Like, to walk alone on that whole stretch of coastline, there are some dodgy sections, some sections with real reputation for, incidents happening. And I tried my very best to keep that kind of thought process, that kind of negative thought process out of my mind, and to be positive and approach each day just sort of as it came, and not to worry too much about what might happen, about worst case scenarios. I think often people get caught up in that spiral of worst case scenarios. And so my sort of first line of defense was always be to smile and be friendly and happy and greet people, sort of almost preemptively, instead of trying to sneak around and look suspicious or look scared. I would present myself, But yes, there are certain sections that are a concern. Walking around the Cape, walking past Macassar and Khayelitsha, that was one of those sections. I had a friend walk with me there because he was like, I'm not letting you walk this bit alone. And we did see a really weird scene as we left the beach, because there's a Denel weapons testing center between the Cape and Somerset West, and it's a restricted section of beach, so we had to walk around it to Somerset West. And as we were leaving the beach through the dunes, we had this weird scene of two guys sort of in the dunes doing who knows what, and I thought maybe it was like a gang initiation ceremony or something, and we just head down and we kept walking. I had another night where I was sleeping just on the balcony of a old sort of abandoned house on the beach, and there was signs of recent activity. There was a pizza box and a Coke bottle and stuff, and I was like, and it was an area that's a hotspot for abalone poaching. So as I went to sleep, I was thinking, geez, I hope these abalone poachers don't rock up here tonight while I'm lying here.
Yeah.
I woke up the next morning and nothing had happened. And then there's a section in Richards Bay, or just north of Richards Bay, between Richards Bay and Sodwana Bay, that's also quite renowned. I know a couple of other people who've had incidents on that section. So there I was very cautious. I sort of start walking at sunrise and walk until sunset, and then after dark, duck into the bush and cover my tracks and pitch my tent. But the amazing thing is that I had absolutely no encounters, no negative incidents. I had some people questioning the legitimacy of what I was doing and accusing me of trespassing and that sort of thing, but those situations were quickly diffused. So it really was amazing that through this whole 8-month expedition, I had no ill encounters.
And how long did you say it was?
8 months.
8 months.
249 days.
Sure. And was it almost every day, okay, well, today I'm going to try at least do 20 Ks or 30 Ks? Or like what was it? Some days you're like, no, I'm chilling.
Yeah, there were definitely those days. I think the shortest day I had was about 100 meters when I walked from the hotel room to reception to say goodbye to everyone. And I wasn't really keen, and I didn't have a plan for the day, and I didn't know where I was staying that night. And I think they could sense my reluctance to leave. And the owner sort of said, well, you can spend another night if you want. And I took the key and I walked straight back to the room. So there were those days where I just chill, hang out. Getting around Cape Town took a while as well. I was there over December and staying with family and Christmas and all that sort of stuff. So we'd walk a day, chill a day. And there was also a section near George where I fell and did some damage to my toe and cut my leg open quite badly. And I took a few days off there. And then while I was taking those days off, my body was like, okay, you're taking a break. Okay. And then I got sick. So that was about 11 days that I didn't walk, which was the longest period of time that I didn't walk. But so I didn't really have a schedule. I estimated it would take me about 7 months, but I wasn't going to rush through it. I was going to enjoy the experience and just take it day by day. So yeah, definitely days where I decided I wasn't going to do anything, or days where I had set a goal and I was going to walk from A to B, and halfway there would meet someone, strike up a conversation, they'd invite me to stay over, and then that's what would happen, and I would finish the rest of that planned day the next day.
And obviously you mentioned falling. What happened, were there other injuries, your feet being walked raw almost? Like, what did you encounter in terms of your body?
It was an interesting journey. So I had decided to walk with Vibram 5 fingers, which have no cushioning at all. And on the west coast, there's a lot of mining areas that are restricted areas. And so from Alexander Bay to Port Nolloth, on those first 3 days, I had to walk along the road. I couldn't walk on the beach. And because I was just starting and I hadn't really found my rhythm and what worked for me, and figured out food and water and all that sort of stuff, my backpack was really heavy in the beginning. It was well over 30 kilograms. So walking with 30 kilograms, no cushioning, on a tar road, 30 kilometers a day. In the beginning, my feet took a real battering. When I got to Port Nolloth, I was broken. I had to take a day off there. And the next 3 days to Kleinseer, I lessened my distance. So I did 20 Ks a day on that stretch, but then developed some inflammation on my feet because of little blisters that had formed on the first 3 days that I was compensating for. So I also ended up spending a night in hospital there because they suspected an infection.
Sure.
It turned out just to be tendinitis, and I needed to rest a little bit. But after that, I sort of started learning to listen to my body. And what I actually learned in those first 3 days is the power of the mind. Your mind can push your body to breaking point if it's strong enough. And that's what happened to me in those first few days. I was like resolute. I was like, I've set my goal. I need to be there in 3 days. And my body just couldn't cope, actually. Yeah. And so I started learning to listen to my body, and I started growing stronger, and got to a point where I think in the Transkei I sort of hit the sweet spot of being fit, strong, healthy, but also in a mentally good position. Obviously, being alone, there was a lot of emotional, psychological strain at times. Feelings of loneliness, not being able to share things with people, not having sort of comforts. So there were times where I'd really question, what the heck are you doing here? And I'd go through these mental dips. And then I found myself really strong sort of from the second half, physically, emotionally, mentally. And then right at the end again, my feet started hurting again. And what I eventually found out, I thought maybe there were stress fractures or something like that. And what we found out was it was just inflammation of the little tarsal joints, the toe and foot joints. And it sounds crazy to say, but I only had 200 kilometers to go at that point. And so it was a matter of grit your teeth, walk through the pain, and just finish.
Well, I mean, after 2,500.
200 isn't that much. Yeah. It's ironic because if you said now, like right now, let's go walk 200 Ks, you'd be like, that's crazy.
You're mad.
But at that point, it was like, I've only got 200 to go.
So obviously you mentioned, your mind and, what kind of things did you go through? What kind of, thoughts did you go through of loneliness? Did you go through periods where you wanted to give up? Did you go through periods where, you completely changed your framework of thinking and your mindset and you saw what you were capable of? Let's talk about, those tough times where you say you were lonely and, then obviously the strength that you also gained from that.
Yeah, it's, I think, a bit of a roller coaster, or maybe a slow motion roller coaster. Early on, there was this excitement, this real thrill of I'm starting this adventure. This is insane. Like even just getting to the start was an adventure because I was living in Pietermaritzburg at the time, so I packed everything up, sent it back to Pretoria, flew from Pretoria to Cape Town, got a bus from Cape Town to Springbok, found a taxi from Springbok to Alexander Bay, and then had to walk to the Orange River Mouth. So just getting to the starting point was an adventure, and it was this thrilling, exciting thing. And after those first couple of days when I was in real pain, I started thinking, what the heck have you done? Like, you're in the most sort of inhospitable part of this country with no one around you. No one really knows where you are. There's not really cell phone signal, so you can't even talk to anyone. I was like, what have you done? And there were definitely times where I had those thoughts, other sections, like in the garden route where there's no beach. It's just cliffs and rocks and thick bush and forest and no paths and really difficult terrain to walk, where if I even wanted to quit or stop, I couldn't, because I had to get to somewhere where I could be picked up, And so there were those times I was like, how did you get yourself into this? And you're just going to have to get yourself out. But funny enough, the idea or the thought of stopping, quitting, going home never really crossed my mind. It was just a matter of taking it a day at a time, facing each challenge that was ahead of you and not getting too far ahead of yourself, which is a difficult thing to do. But especially early on, people would sort of ask me what I was doing. And when I'd only walked, let's say 100 or 200 Ks, and I was saying, I'm walking the whole coastline of South Africa, it sounded a bit audacious. And people were a bit skeptical. They were like, okay, if you say so. But towards the end, it became, I've already walked 3,000. I've just got 500 to go. That sort of self-belief starts building as you start ticking off the days, ticking off the distances. But in terms of the mental state throughout, the difficult times or the lonely times I found was, there were a few different things. So there was meal times, sitting down to cook and eat, which I think for humans is a very social time, actually. Time to talk about the day, reflect on things. And so that was often a lonely time. And experiencing something beautiful, a waterfall or a sunset or a view or a dolphin doing a backflip in the ocean or something like that there wasn't someone to share that experience with. Those were quite tough as well. So it was definitely a fluctuation, but I often found it also a form of meditation. I would sometimes walk for 3 hours and not realize that I just walked 3 hours. I'd be like, people would ask, what do you think about? And I so often would be like, I have no idea what I spent today thinking about. I was there and then I got there. And I think so you almost go into like a meditative or trance-like state in those times. And then other times where every step is a real struggle. It's like, okay, the wind is howling, the sand is soft. Every step you feel it, you have to sort of push yourself to keep going.
Yeah.
So it is a real mental challenge as well. I think even more so than a physical one.
So you walked the entire coastline of South Africa. For you, what is the most beautiful part? You know, obviously it depends on your mindset when you were walking at those points, but you know, because that was in 2013 you did it. Yeah. So where have you that you fell in love with the area, now you maybe go back there, you revisit the places that you obviously really loved within the coastline?
What's amazing about our coastline is the diversity of it, how different the sections are. So starting on the west coast, which is basically a semi-desert, getting into the southern Cape where you've got beautiful, I mean, if you see photos of some of these beaches, it's like this turquoise water, it looks like the Bahamas kind of vibe, people don't know that exists. White sand, turquoise water. Then you move into the garden route, which is the garden route because it's so beautiful. For walking, it's not ideal. It's really challenging, but it is amazing. Having these huge Otanikwa yellow woods and these big cliffs and, just stunning landscapes. But I think my definite favorite section was the Transkei, the Wild Coast. So the Eastern Cape.
Good answer.
between, I would say from Port Alfred even, all the way through to Port Edward is amazing. I think because it's not so built up, not so populated, still quite natural. The villages in the Transkei are just amazing. The people are so friendly and welcoming.
Well, my family, so we've been going to the Eastern Cape. There's a place called, you obviously would have walked past it, called Sinsa.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been going there. I'm 25 now. We've been going, I was pretty much since I was born. And, my parents found out about it because they asked their vet, I don't know if it was their vet, but they asked someone, where is the best place to take dogs on a holiday? Where's the best coastal area? And then obviously they heard of Sinsa. They went there every single year since they found out 20-something years later. They've been going there. My fiance's family goes more into the Transkei. So, just past Kaimouth, more into like the actual Transkei. And, I've been going there with her for 5 years as well. After my period of my family, we go to Sinsa for like 10 days and I go to the Transkei for 10 days. And it's amazing time because there's nothing. And it's amazing. I mean, you have to, if you once you go over the pond, if you need water, you have to go catch the ferry, go over again. Like, so you plan for everything other than maybe going to Butterworth, but you don't want to have to do that. So that's what's nice about that area is there's so much, it's almost like this has been put here and it's yours. Enjoy it. Like compare that to Cape Town. I've had this discussion with someone else on the podcast. Obviously, Cape Town has its place and it's amazing and, great experiences there. But for me personally, what I want to do, I recently just got into cycling and being able to just go and cycle 50 Ks in these rural areas where, half of them have probably never left their little village, and that's where you actually truly meet people and you bond with people. And I'm sure obviously you met so many locals within those particular areas that you went through that you really learned so much about different cultures, different people, different languages.
Yeah, no, the Transkei really is a cultural experience. Because, like you said, there's no infrastructure. So people walk between towns or they walk from the village to the hotel where they work or whatever it is. There's so many little footpaths. And I often find people who'd be like, what's this white dude doing walking here? Like, let me chat to him. And they talk to me and they say, where are you going? And I'm like, no, I'm going to this backpackers, whatever. It's like, no, I'll take you. I'll show you. Do you know the way? I'm like, not really, but I'm sure I'll find you. He's like, no, I'll take you. And I had guys walk 2, 3, 4 hours with me sometimes just to show me the way and then be like, okay, cool, cheers, and then turn around and walk back, Another memory that sticks out was this guy sitting on this hill, headland, looking out over the ocean with this big white bucket next to him and these aviators, and he was just like casually chilling. And I walked past and I greeted him and he greeted me and he was like, what are you doing? Come sit down. And in this bucket was
mussels.
This komboti, that's
okay.
Beer made of
like
fermented pap, basically. And he offered me some of this. And I was like, oh, this stuff looks hectic. But I had a swig and I was like, one is enough, thanks.
I won't be walking anymore.
This is where I'm done for now. No, and I just sat there chilling with this guy for like 10, 15 minutes. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, no, I'm just enjoying the view, man. And he was just there by himself chilling.
It's different.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's more relaxed. I found the populated places around the cities, like you mentioned, Cape Town, the busier a beach was, the less likely it was that someone would come talk to me. It's almost like you're an outcast if you're not with the masses. So if you're not tanning or playing paddle bats or surfing and you're walking with a backpack and
well, I mean, if you walk on Clifton Beach with this massive backpack and everyone else is just chilling there, like, what's this guy doing?
What is a hobo doing on our beach, you know? Where, in the rural areas, you just are more, it's just friendlier, more relaxed. People are more open and embracing of experience, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, me cycling there wasn't one period of 1 kilometer or 1 second that I ever felt threatened, other than maybe a pack of township dogs chasing me, because that happens. And I assume, obviously, you also maybe had some animal encounters. That could also be something.
Yeah, so people often ask, you know, what's the most dangerous thing on the coastline? And I'd say 1, myself, 2, dogs. And those village dogs were, I had a couple of close encounters with some of them. Luckily, I had trekking poles with me that I could sort of ward them off with, or there'd always be a friendly villager around to chase them off.
Yeah, because the owners, I was getting chased by, obviously they're bruck, so you can't really tell what they are, but it was 4 of them. And this was when I was on the road. It wasn't even on a dirt road, I was on the main road. And these 4 dogs are running after me. And then the owner, the herdsman, whatever he was, just whistles, and then they instantly stop and go back. I mean, my Joburg dogs aren't that responsive to when I call them.
No. So that, I had a few close calls with dogs. But
there was a part in the Western Cape with a bunch of seals.
Yes, okay. So part of the main purpose of the expedition was to sort of highlight coastal conservation issues. Things like overfishing, pollution, mining, illegal mining activities, and that sort of thing. And on the West Coast, we've got massive seal colonies, Cape Fur seal colonies. And there was a stretch where I just started seeing carcasses, seal carcass after seal carcass after seal carcass. And or you'd see a seal kind of lying on the beach in the middle of the day. And I thought, it's sleeping, it's having a nap or whatever. And sometimes I'd sneak up to them and give them a fright, and then they'd run off into the ocean and I'd have a laugh. And I got to Lambert's Bay, and there I was chatting with one of the conservationists. And he was telling me that a seal that's lying on the beach like that is probably undernourished. And it doesn't have enough blubber to keep itself warm in the ocean and swim around and look for food. So it's come to shore to keep warm and to conserve energy, basically. So it's malnourished. And all these seal carcasses were seals that were dying from starvation. And there's various reasons for there not being enough fish. Certain natural cycles of fish die off, but the main thing was overfishing. The waters are just being plundered, both onshore and offshore. And so the incident you're referring to was on a long stretch of beach. I mean, there's nothing and no one for miles, and I hadn't seen anything or anyone in kilometers. And the next thing, I see this little black figure on the beach, and it's a baby seal, a little seal pup, on its own, kind of bleating like a little lamb, is what it sounded like. And even blind still, it was so young, it was still blind. And I walked up to this thing, and it heard me coming and just sort of came towards me and nuzzled into me and like basically cuddled into me. And I realized this thing has no chance. Like, its mother's not here, its mother's abandoned, it always died. And this little pup is just here on the beach by itself, lost. I mean, there weren't other seals for miles. And it was heartbreaking, knowing that I could do absolutely nothing for this thing. I couldn't take it with me. I couldn't feed it anything. I tried to give it I think I had some tuna or some sardines. But it was too young to eat solids. It still needed milk. And it was heartbreaking walking away from this little pup, knowing that, probably by the time I reach my campsite for the night, it won't be around anymore. And so there were those moments of sort of stark realization that the impact we're having is far-reaching, and we don't always see it. That's the thing. So we think, okay, I'm doing my bit. I'm using my bamboo straw, and I'm recycling my plastics, and I'm not buying a plastic packet from Woolworths every day. But our space is neat and tidy and clean and green, but we don't see the far-reaching effects that the human species has, over the planet. So a real kind of sobering moment on the journey.
Were you into conservation before this journey, or was it maybe seeing what you saw along the coast that got you into conservation?
So I was always, as a little boy, I was sort of obsessed with cricket and animals. I either wanted to be a Proteas cricketer or a game ranger. So I've always had a love for wildlife and the outdoors. And when I was first investigating the coastal expedition, I thought, okay, how can I make this about more than just me? Obviously, I wanted to go on this adventure, but how can it be about more than just that? And so I approached the Wilderness Foundation, who are the Wilderness Foundation were founded alongside the Wilderness Leadership School, which was founded by Ian Player, who's a very influential conservationist in South Africa. He basically brought rhinos back from extinction. And I approached them with this project idea, and they really liked the proposal, and they said, cool, we'll endorse the project. And so that was a relationship that started with them, and to promote some of their conservation projects. So I think it was definitely the beginning of what I would say a more conservation related approach to what I do. There was always a love for the outdoors, but this, I think, was the first real sort of active form of conservation that I started embarking on.
And, going through this whole journey, and obviously you've done other things very similar as well, and, you've formed a career out of, backpacking and guiding and hiking and all of that. But, what is your biggest takeaway from this whole journey that you went through, that maybe people that, think what they want is to sit behind a desk for 10 hours a day and get a set salary, is it something that, maybe there's something that they can get from that?
Yeah, there were a few takeaways. One was that people are awesome. It really did create a renewed positive sort of mindset around people, because, there's always bad news out, social media, on the news, in the newspapers. The world's just full of bad news. And so these were all sorts of little feel-good kind of stories that, I suppose, renewed this sort of hope for humanity in a sense. But in terms of your personal path, it definitely changed a lot of my perspectives and outlooks. I realized you can get by with a lot less than the average sort of suburban person does. We really do live in excess, and so that was one of the things that I took away. And once you realize that, the drive or the need for earning a huge salary starts to subside as well, which also means that desire, or that need to push to earn or to get that job or to get that promotion also starts falling away. And it is difficult, because obviously we need finances to live in this world we've created. And I do acknowledge that. And there are certain challenges, and I was fortunate in that I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't have children. I wasn't married. I didn't have major debts that I had to pay off. So I was in a position to be able to give up the income and to pursue this thing. And it is difficult. There are big sacrifices that you do make, lifestyle sacrifices, but at the end of the day, and I think, like you said in the intro, is you can't, no amount of money or material possessions or fast cars or big houses can make up for the human experience. And if you're dissatisfied or unhappy with maybe the job you're doing or the relationships you have, what's money going to do to change that? And so forging a life, and so it's a tricky thing to talk about, because there are very real limitations, and it is an immense privilege to be able to step away from formal employment. I fully acknowledge that there are countless South Africans, if we keep it in that context, who, one, don't have a job and would desperately love to just have a job to have an income, and two, people who do have jobs who are supporting an entire family or just are not in a position where they can give that up. So I fully acknowledge the privilege of being able to do that. But there are ways and means of creating a more meaningful existence, even within that sort of more traditional context. And so the take home, or the message to people, would be to not give up on that, to not give up on the things you're passionate about, the things that really excite you. Because for me, fulfillment and purpose is important. So if you feel purpose in what you do, you're going to finish the end of the day fulfilled. So that doesn't matter what that job is. As long as you feel that sense of fulfillment at the end of the day, which was what was missing for me in the engineering world. I think pursuing that passion and keeping it alive, keeping those hopes and dreams alive, even if it's just a hobby, something you do on the side that makes you happy, that gives you that sense of fulfillment and purpose, that is more than just about yourself. I think many, many people live for themselves, and that only takes you so far. That can only motivate you so far. I find humans are better motivated, do their best when they are actually working for something bigger than themselves, outside of themselves. So I think somewhere in there lies the message.
Yeah, I think also, it doesn't, if you are, let's say you're unhappy in a job, it doesn't mean now you have to quit your job and, go live in a, some hut somewhere in the Transkei. It doesn't mean that. It means maybe you need to reevaluate, because I know for myself, I've never been employed by someone. Obviously I've had clients who essentially pay me for jobs that I do for them. But I wake up every day excited to do the work that I'm doing. Yes, it's still in a corporate environment, but I get to dictate what I wear. I get to dictate, my schedule. I get to say, okay, cool, tomorrow I want to go and cycle in Pretoria. I'm going to make sure at the evening some of that work is done for the next day, so that I can take 4 hours, 5 hours in the morning and go ride. I think it's also, people need to work towards the freedom. Obviously, finance comes with that, but I think the freedom to do what you love. And, for me, what I love is growing something and building something and having, something to look back and be like, this is what my work and this is all the sacrifices that I made this is what brought it to fruition. It's not, look how much money I have in my bank. It's, what is the influence that I had on the people throughout this journey? What benefit have they got from the experience with me? What have I been able to, employ this person to maybe for the first time be able to buy their kid, a Christmas present? Or what have I been able to help this person with? And, it's just more about, the value that you can create for other people. And, because I think at the end of the day, what you do for others brings you that fulfillment as well. Because I'm sure you saw, all those people that helped you, you saw the fulfillment that they felt because of how they helped you, and I think that's more meaningful than anything else. Because you say people live for themselves. You can't live for yourself. Of course, yourself needs to be a priority in certain things, in terms of your own mental health. You can't always put someone else's mental health above yours. It's like being in an airplane. You have to look after yourself first, then you can look after someone else. So you have to look after yourself to be able to look after the masses.
Yeah, no, you definitely do. As you say, and in a guiding context, it's crucial as well. You know, if I'm guiding a group of people in the mountains and the weather turns, I need to make sure that I am got my rain jacket on. I'm warm enough, because otherwise I'm not. I'm also going to start getting hypothermia. I'm not going to be able to help anyone. So yeah, it's definitely a valid point, and you do need to take care of yourself. But as you say, the fulfillment comes from being in a position where you've taken care of yourself and now you can help others. And you talk about offering employment. I've got a trip coming up next month, and it was so popular that I had to book a second group, and I was able to give another guide an opportunity to earn some bucks, and that
Nice.
like really made me feel good,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, that's the stuff that should be driving us.
So these trips now, do you have, a particular region that you mainly do these trips in, or is it, once a month or once every 2 months you change up the regions, or how does it work?
Yeah, I like to change it up a bit. So I do work all over the country. Up until 2019, we won't use the C word. I was doing a lot of school expeditions. So working mostly with Pretoria and Johannesburg-based schools.
Is that like school camps?
Yeah, so like camps, hikes, longer trips as well. So anything from 3 days up to 3 weeks. And those would normally be in Mpumalanga, Limpopo. That sort of private and commercial trips. I do stuff in the Cape. I do stuff in the Drakensberg, Limpopo, Mpumalanga as well, Magaliesberg, in the northwest. I'm going to start branching out into the neighboring countries as well. So yeah, anything that's new and exciting, if I can get to a place that I haven't been before, or that I seldom get to go to, all the better. There is also benefit to knowing a place really well. So places I've been to a lot is also helpful. You're able to offer more insights and knowledge about those areas. And yeah, so basically anywhere in the outdoors. And then running trips, yeah, I sort of aim to do one trip a month at least. This month I've got Magaliesberg next month doing the Volkberg. The month after that I'll be in Knysna in the Tsitsikamma forest, and then back in the Drakensberg. So it really is jumping around.
For anyone that wants to do like a guided hike, let's just say a 3-day hike, where do you suggest someone starts with? Or, maybe if you're a beginner, intermediate, and then obviously if you want the full, 14 peaks experience type of thing.
Yeah, so what's amazing about the hiking specifically is there's something for everyone. So whether you're a beginner who's never done a multi-day hike before, they're really easy trails with huts or cottages that you can stay in, so you don't have to carry things like tents and sleeping bags and cooking equipment. You've got your slack packing options where all you do is carry your little day bag with food and water for the day, and you stay in really nice luxury accommodation, right up to your wilderness hiking, let's say a Drakensberg Grand Traverse, 14 days in the mountains with no other facilities, carrying everything you need. So there really is something for everyone. And I would, sort of make suggestions based on someone's level of experience and also what they're after. I know some people don't like roughing it, but they still enjoy being out there. Then your slack packing options are awesome. Other people really want to immerse themselves in a wild space. And so then a more sort of a wilderness experience is what they would be after.
And because I know so I want to plan one now with my fiance for my birthday weekend. And there was one in the Drakensberg where it was 45 Ks over 3 days. And, obviously you having expert knowledge in the field, what type, because I want to completely submerge myself. Unfortunately, I can't afford longer than 3 days to be away. But, what kind of places would you look at? And, for someone, anyone that's into fitness, goes to gym, does running, that kind of stuff, I assume they'll be able to manage those kind of things, obviously, if they're willing enough to maybe be rained on while they're sleeping.
Yeah, definitely. A general base fitness is all you need. There is sort of it is different. I often say, there's different kinds of strengths. So I couldn't bench press much, but I can carry a 30 kilogram backpack up a steep slope. But that base fitness will get you through. There's obviously the backpack's going to hurt a little bit if you've never done it before. But as you say,
But also, for me personally, I want that pain.
Okay.
Because I want to experience that pain and, submerge yourself fully with the experience. And, you want to have blisters afterwards. Obviously, you don't want to be so sore or whatever that you're not enjoying it. But, I want to be like, this backpack's heavy now. I just want to get there. Like I want to go through the experience because, we live such sheltered lives. We've never really had to mentally push past much. And going and being in those situations where your backpack's heavy, you're counting down the kilometers. It doesn't seem enjoyable in certain times if you are struggling like that. But, getting through it and building that mental strength is worth it.
There are definitely times where it's not enjoyable. They talk about type 1 fun, which is fun at the time, and type 2 fun, which is fun in hindsight.
Yeah.
And hiking is often type 2 fun. If you want to experience that pain and the elements, Drakensberg is definitely the place to be. Climbing up to the escarpment, you're probably looking at climbing about 1,000 meters on your first day up into the escarpment. And then once you're up, it's very undulating, up and down all the time. So a 3-day, sounds like maybe Mweni circuits you were looking at there.
Yeah, I think so.
Mweni is beautiful.
Yeah, I think it was that.
The views there are absolutely stunning. So in a very short time, you get almost this highlights package of the Drakensberg. So it is beautiful, but you'll head up perhaps Rockery's Pass, which, like I say, is 1,000 meters of climbing in a day. Spend a day up at the top, and then the next day you come down again, which is almost more brutal than the uphill because your knees and your joints, your hips really start taking strain when you've got that weight on your back and you're going down steep slopes. And then there's the added factor of the weather. The weather up there can change in an instant and can be really, really harsh. The temperature difference between 2,000 meters above sea level and 3,000 meters above sea level is quite dramatic. And so is the wind and the elements. It's in the Drakensberg. Has historically snowed every month of the year, January through to December. There's been snow on the Drakensberg. So you really also need to be prepared for anything when you're up there, which for an inexperienced person is part of the benefit of having a guide. I know South Africans, we kind of tend to shy away from guides. We're like, no, I know what I'm doing. I know the bush. We tend to have that approach, and also don't necessarily always have the finances to pay for a guide. But there definitely is benefit in having that and just having someone with that level of experience and knowing what to do should conditions turn for the worse.
So you went through this, crazy 8 months of your life. Has there been, obviously you've done other things, but has there been something that dramatic that you've done or plan on doing? I don't know, paddling around Madagascar, for example. Like, are there any of those things that you want to do in the future?
So there are some ideas, some really crazy ideas. Ranging from like smaller stuff to like really big stuff. I haven't done anything that big again since. 2 years ago in 2020, I did do a 500-kilometer walk through the Greater Kruger and the Panorama Route area, which was a fundraiser for communities in that area, who were completely devastated by COVID's lockdown on tourism.
Did you wear Vibrams then?
No, I didn't wear Vibrams. There I was wearing Fellies.
Okay, well, still not exactly.
They were quite comfy, quite cushy. The sap marks are nice and soft, and they put a nice sports gel kind of insole in. So
my fiance's got
really
a few pairs of sap marks.
Oh no, they're very, very comfy. When they first said, we'll give you a pair of shoes, I was like, listen, I'll wear them, but I might not wear them the whole way. Yeah. And after the first day, I was like, these are awesome. The only problem is when they get wet, they take about 3 days to dry.
And was that, always within Big Five areas?
Not always. So we started in Big Five. We started in the Sabi Sands, and then we headed out of the Big Five area through the communities, sort of towards Hazyview, Sabi, and then along the escarpment past Graskop, along the Blyde River Canyon, and then back into Big Five, Blue Canyon, Kayandlovu.
And those where did you sleep? We need like a big 5 area. Was it like
We got
obviously
spoiled.
with rifles or?
Yeah, so we were walking with rangers or guides with rifles, but we were very spoiled because the lodges were all empty because of lockdown. We got to stay in these luxury 5-star, 6, 7-star lodges.
The 30K a night rooms.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, the one suite, I think a 10-sleeper suite was like 250,000 a night, something like that. Yeah, so we definitely got spoiled on that one.
That's cool.
Yeah, but in terms of other trips and ideas, I haven't. What's strange is that sort of saying ignorance is bliss. Before the coastal expedition, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. So now, having been through it, I understand the difficulties. I understand the challenges.
So now you have to mentally prepare a bit more.
Yeah, I'm more apprehensive. I'm more scared. I'm like, do I really want to go through that again? And I wouldn't do something that long again, and definitely not alone. I'll do shorter things alone. I'll do longer things with, a team. But it was I think a unique time in my life, a unique age period, and a time where that was what I needed, or worked really well. But some of that, what I would love to do, and this is probably the next thing I would do, the next big thing I would do, is to close the loop. So having started on the west coast of South Africa, walking around the coast to the east, to Cozy Bay, what I would love to do is to get on a bike and cycle from Cozy Bay, maybe do like a round Swaziland loop, cycle across to the Drakensberg, to Mweni, where we were talking about earlier, and then hike up onto the berg.
I thought you were going to say close the loop of Africa,
Yeah,
of the coast, African coast.
I do know a guy who had an ambition of doing that, and he walked
What is it?
from Cape Agulhas to Namibia.
So around my bike, around Africa, my bicycle.
Yeah, Rian.
Yeah.
That was on his bike.
Yeah.
Walking, I think it's going to take that's a lifetime.
That's the rest of your life planned out.
Yeah. Arlu, who walked the coastline as well, the coast of South Africa, he had this idea to go and do that, and walked from Cape Agulhas up to the top of Namibia. Got to Angola, and he was like, okay, this is an undertaking. Let me maybe do it in stages, or
yeah.
he says.
You almost fly to the place you finished and then walk a bit more, go back for a year, live your life, and then go back for another 6-month trip.
Yeah, and what's really cool is every year I get probably 5 to 10 emails from people saying, hey, I saw your thing about the coastline. I want to do something similar. Can we chat?
Would you do something like that where you do a guided trip along the coastline?
Coast.
Obviously not the entire thing, because it's 99% of people can't afford 8 months out of their life.
Yeah, there are definitely sections I would do that on. Transkei, West Coast, definitely sections that lend themselves towards that kind of expedition. But yeah, the loop, this sort of smaller loop I want to close, is from Cozy Bay back to the Orange River mouth. So do the cycle to the berg, hike up to the source of the Senku River in Lesotho, which becomes the Orange River, and walk the river until it becomes paddleable, and then paddle the Orange all the way back to the source. So that would be, my estimate would be about 1,000 Ks on the bike and about 2,000-ish Ks paddling.
Sure.
So that I would love to do that.
That's amazing. And now you're moving to Hoedspruit.
Yes, moving into the bush, fulfilling that childhood dream. I didn't make the cricket squad, so I had to go for the game ranger instead. And very excited about that. That's happening at the end of Feb. And just really looking forward to spending more time in the Lowveld, in the bush, upping my bush skills, bush knowledge. And it's just such a beautiful area. So you've got 4 biomes sort of all around there. You've got the Lowveld, the savanna that people know as the Bushveld, with the Big 5. Then you've got Mariepskop and the Blyde River Canyon. And in the canyon, you've got these beautiful indigenous forests. It feels like you're in Tsitsikamma, in Knysna on the garden route, looking at yellow wood trees and Knysna luries. Right on top of Mariepskop, you've got some fynbos. And then on the top of the escarpment, on Graskop side, you've got the grassland. So it's just a really diverse area in a very small space. And so I'm excited to go and explore and get to know that area really well.
That's exciting. Grant, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, maybe one day I'll be on one of your hikes.
Yeah, I hope so, Jesse. I look forward
Definitely.
to seeing you out on the trails.